between 1978 and 1988, you had the release of 4 films that established the icons of the slasher subgenre of horror films. Those would be Michael Myers from Halloween, Friday the 13th series, which introduced us to Jason, A Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger, and then Child's Play, which gave us Chucky. Of all of those, I think they're all basically instantly recognizable. I would say that I think Jason is probably the most recognizable of all of them. The films that he's in vary in quality from good-ish to atrocious and horrible. I think I wouldn't say Friday the 13th, which is the original, is actually the best of those films. I'd actually put Freddy versus Jason on the top of that list, which is kind of funny because that movie is actually kind of good, especially in comparison to the other film, because it has a lot of confidence. I'll talk a little bit about that in the meat of the review. But yeah, I want to talk about Friday the 13th today. It is the spooky season. It's October, so we're going to talk about the original Friday the 13th. Thanks so much for checking out the video. Before we get started, click on that red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new piece of content. So, Friday the 13th came out in 1980, 2 years after Halloween, wants to establish itself as its own thing, but also copies a lot of what Halloween attributes its success to. Here's how the movie is similar to Halloween. It starts off basically in the exact same way. You've got an unseen killer from a first-person point of view committing a series of murders, or in the case of Halloween, a single murder. You then have a jump forward in time and new characters in the modern day establishing all of essentially the exposition through a series of dialogue dumps and talking about, the history of the character and the murders and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And the interesting thing about this one is it sets itself apart in a lot of ways from that structure right off the bat, which is something that, you have to give it some credit for at the very least. It doesn't show us the killer until the very, very, the last 10 minutes of the movie. We have no idea who the killer is. That's certainly different from Halloween, where in the very beginning we know that Michael Myers commits the murder because he's jailed. He's thrown in like an insane asylum for it immediately at the beginning of the movie. And then Friday the 13th drags all of that out, stretches out for, an hour and a half long film, and then has its character reveal at the very end, which then also has its own stinger scene at the very end, the very, very end, that then carries over the lore into the rest of the series. Halloween has the scene where Dr. Loomis shoots Michael Myers off the balcony, and he dies, and then Dr. Loomis goes to check on Laurie, comes back, and when he looks over the balcony, Michael Myers is gone. Friday the 13th does its own version of that by having Jason, who has been talked about ad nauseum throughout the movie as the motivation for the main character. He jumps out of the water and attacks Alice as she's in a boat in the middle of the lake. And this individual scene and the decision by Sean Cunningham and the filmmakers to add it to the film ends up carrying so much weight because of the way it impacts the series moving forward. Jason becomes, the figure that these films revolve around, and he doesn't even get his iconic mask until the third film. In the second movie, he has the burlap sack over his head with the one eye cut out, and that movie is, creepy in its own ways, and it also does a lot to just mimic these films. But back to the kind of first person structure that they have in Friday the 13th, that's, it's layered throughout the movie, but then the film does have its own set of, interesting and unique and kind of fun relationships with its lead characters that, pardon the pun, but bleed throughout the film. And I like this movie, but I don't love it. It's well filmed, it's confident, it's got a couple scenes, particularly one scene in one of the camp bathrooms that is creepy as hell. And then it's got some problems. It's married a little bit too much of what made Halloween successful. And it tries a little too hard to be like that movie. And it made enough money at the box office. And the ending is really kind of a bummer. Not because I don't like the twist. I think having Pamela Voorhees as this vengeful mother character who wants to, make amends and commit all these crimes because she loved her son. Like, it's a cool story. It's unique. It's interesting, and it sets itself apart. And she's not Michael Myers. Michael Myers is a blank slate. He's this evil character that we know is evil, and we know is horrible, and we know from the very beginning that he's like the embodiment of everything horrible. Whereas this character is meant to be sympathetic, and I think Betsy Palmer does a good enough job with her dialogue to establish that part of the story. And then it's interesting to see where the series goes from there. I don't want to talk too much about future films, but you have The Mask and Halloween Friday the 13th Part 3. I mean, Crispin Glover is in the final chapter. You've got Corey Feldman as young Tommy Jarvis, who then kind of becomes like the counterpart to Jason, who is in multiple, later films and is sprinkled throughout Friday the 13th history. And you've got zombie Jason. You've got Jason completely jumping the shark by going to Manhattan, which it makes literally no sense at all, because they're in a boat in a freshwater lake, and then they end up in Manhattan, which, I hate to spoil this for you, there's no way to do that. Like, you can't get from a freshwater lake in what appears to be Appalachia to New York City, Manhattan, which is an island in the Atlantic Ocean, in New York Harbor. You can't get there, next to New York Harbor. You can't get there unless you remove the boat from the water, unless there's like a series of inland locks going from Camp Crystal Lake, wherever that is. Maybe it's in upstate New York. Okay, so maybe, all right, so work with me here. I'm kind of like hashing this out as I do this review and this recording. Maybe maybe there's a river. All right, maybe there's a freshwater river that goes from Camp Crystal Lake to a smaller lake, a smaller lake that then has a lock that goes into the Hudson River. And maybe Friday the 13th really takes place in upstate New York. I mean, who knows? The movie doesn't say so. So congratulations, Friday the 13th. I just took one of your worst plot holes and solved it for you. You're welcome. And then the movie also has Jason going to hell. And then the movie has Jason going to freaking space, because why wouldn't he? That trope, the Leprechaun movies steal off of that trope. And when your character finally goes into space, I think you have lost all sense of reality. Now, the movie, the character of Jason is not even in this movie, but has become so synonymous with the series that I kind of love it. And this is not the best movie in this series. Traditionally, the first movie in a horror series is always the best. Like The Exorcist is obviously the best of those movies. Like, it's not even close. Jaws, I mean, come on. Jaws is like so much exponentially better than its sequels that it's not fair. And then, but Friday the 13th, that's not the case. This isn't even the best movie in this series. I think that Freddy versus Jason, which takes the two, those two characters and pits them together, I think that's the best of all of these movies. And even this might sound kind of blasphemous, but I even think the Friday the 13th reboot that Marcus Nispel directed is better than this one. And that's going to sound blasphemous, but like, that movie has its own sense of like fun and energy about it that really takes that lore and makes a direct sequel to the original. And then I think that movie is loads of fun, even though, come on, it's trash. These movies are all trash to a certain extent. So Friday the 13th, Betsy Palmer's good. Kevin Bacon's in it, which is kind of cool. He gets a arrow through the throat, which is kind of a bummer of a way to go out. dudes get heads crushed. It's got like the creepy old guy that's like the town local who warns everybody about impending doom. And the setting is really, really cool. It's actually filmed at a like kids camp in New Jersey, in like the middle of New Jersey. And I like the setting. I like the most of the characters. But it's not high cinema. It's not high art, but it does a good job establishing itself and then creating all of these layers and thoughts and ideas and set pieces and props that end up playing out in future sequels. So if you like horror movies, Friday the 13th is certainly an important part of horror history and something that you should check out if you like these types of movies. It's not a great movie. The ending drags on way too long. The reveal of the bad guy is cool, but then again takes way too long for her to like fight with the main character and then get her head chopped off. Spoilers. So yeah, check it out, Friday the 13th. And thanks so much for checking out the review. If you liked it, found it helpful, please consider subscribing. You can also like and share the video. That tells YouTube that, hey, it's worth promoting. So sound off in the comments. Let me know what you think of Friday the 13th. Am I way off base in saying that this movie is fine but not amazing? Let me know, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.